Greetings. Chapter 20. WW1. My grandmother was 12. My other grandmother was 9. My granddads, I never knew them. They were in like 1890 something. But anyway, so they were 9 and 12, I guess, when this thing breaks out. And so more on that later. No big deal here. I'm just kind of going to flip through. I've eliminated most of them, but a lot of these slides I'm just going to have a little comment. If I've added something, it'll be a different color. I haven't added anything here yet. Now, the decision for war, they talk about the war in Europe. I want to make sure you know about the outbreak of the war and U.S. initial reaction. President Wilson, very clear for us United States to maintain its neutrality and for the American people to maintain their neutrality in their thought as well as in their deed. In their thought as well as in their deed. So, you can't even be taking sides. Well, that's not very realistic, especially considering immigration. And remember, the number one immigrant group was Germans. Kind of a padded statistic, since if you were speaking German, they kind of checked off German for most of them. But anyway, number one immigrant group coming out of Europe is Germany, and now Germany, it's on the other side. So with all the ethnicity here in the United States, these folks, it's going to be hard to get some of these folks to deviate from what their homeland is doing. So we've got a new fear here in this country, and we'll see how we dealt with it here in a bit. Of course, being neutral, Wilson expected to be treated neutral, including being able to continue our economic trade unabated, unaffected by WW1. Well, partner, it don't work that way. Nothing personal, but United States just got caught in the middle. I mean, Great Britain not going to let Germany import-export. Germany's not going to let Great Britain import-export. We got caught in the middle. We demand them to let us trade unabated by the war. It ain't going to work that way. And then, of course, both sides, as I've referenced, but let me point out, both sides are violating our neutral rights as we see it. We being the United States, not that I was there, whatever, but Submarine warfare is strictly the Germans, so that's obviously going to tilt American public opinion a little bit further. Nice little picture here of the war, the advancements of war. Timeline. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Little timeline action. You pick on Serbia, you're bringing in the Russians. Boom. You bring in the Russians, you bring in the Germans on the other side. bring in the Germans, you're going to end up bringing in the British, because Germany invaded Belgium here, and that was a no-no according to the British. So here we go, right there. You know what one of my pet peeves is the average Jane and Joe on the street, you know, when asked about WW1, caused by the sinking of the Lusitania. It was caused by the sinking of the Lusitania. Well, now, you know what, that's all fine and good, but you're getting ready to upgrade your knowledge if you haven't already. The Lusitania was just the first. You know, it was just the first passenger ship sunk by a German U-boat that had Americans on board. The Sussex, the Arabic, then the Sussex, and of course after the Sussex is sunk, Wilson forces the Germans to announce the Sussex Pledge, in which Germany claims that it will no longer practice unrestricted submarine warfare on passenger vessels. Now, they argue that the Lusitania had munitions in the hold of its ship, and of course the British denied it. This is a British ship, as your overhead here points out. But of course the British denied it. Well, we found out later that the Germans were correct. The British were kind of using these passenger ships as human shields and transporting munitions. So, you know, it's not always clear cut, is it? But anyway, this is just the first of many. So it's submarine warfare that brings us in. If Germany would have stopped after the sinking of the Lusitania, then nothing would have ever come of the issue. Well, maybe not nothing, but wouldn't have been what it is. Speaking of our trade, of course, look at Germany. Then the war starts. 8% of the 1914 total is what we traded with Germany. Isn't that amazing? 8%. And then look at the others. Italy, 364, 390, 257. You wouldn't have to tell me twice. But, you know, human nature, we're invincible. Too many of us got on them. Got on them then, we'd get on them today. A little campaign action. Okay, look at the list of 5 items. Number 2, who kept us out of war. Okay, so that's the only one that applies to this chapter, but look at the other 4 apply to the progressivism chapter. The money trust, the 8-hour day, extending the partial post, so a little more government efficiency there, and farmer rural credit. Interesting. Of course, war is going on. Prosperity, preparedness. He kept us out of war. That was the big campaign slogan. And he promised American families, I will not send any of your sons into a foreign war. Remember that. Here we go. Whew. Now, with the Zimmerman telegram, Wilson asks one simple question. is it still a foreign war? It don't look too foreign to me. You talk about you're going to be taking Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. They can't do that. That's ridiculous. Well, you know what? That's what started the war. That's what they're doing in Europe. The Germans are already doing it. Austria-Hungary's already doing it. The Ottoman Empire's already doing it. They are taking out the eraser and erasing existing borders and redrawing them the way they want to draw them. So as silly as it looks, well, they can't take Texas, New Mexico, and that's what they're doing in Europe. Why can't they do it here? So, oops. Good thing it was intercepted. Now, of course, the conspiracy theorists think that the British created this Zimmerman telegram to draw us into war, but I can't go with that. So the British intercepted this telegram, and of course let us know about it, and we're in an uproar. Wilson, consulting with one of our founding fathers. Well, not founding fathers, so what would Lincoln be? One of our revered Alright, when I teach 14 points, I break it down into 3 categories. One, it's going to break up the empires. And it's going to create new countries out of those empires based on self-determination. Meaning that the people there themselves will determine their governments. Okay, now I've put in blue here: democracy, free trade, disarmament, self-determination. This, of course, is your book's definition, and I'm just kind of playing with it. First category was to get rid of the empires and create new countries based on self-determination. Second is to establish a set of international behaviors, and that's the democracy, free trade, disarmament. And then 3, a League of Nations, an association of countries, to implement the terms of this peace treaty. That this, of course, is Wilson's proposal, and that's how they end up. We're going to have difficulty with this treaty, as Wilson cannot sell it to the Senate. Remember, Senate confirmation is required of any treaty that the President negotiates. The President has the power to sign treaties, but before they become official, the Senate has to confirm them. And our Senate never confirmed the Treaty of Paris, which ended WW1, or the Treaty of Versailles, 1919. We established a separate peace with the Central Powers, and we never signed the peace treaty. Therefore, we never joined this League of Nations, which is our own creation. I mean, it's our president's. But let's move on. Okay, kiddies, we can all chip in and do our part. I just thought this was a cool piece of art, of course, reflecting the Great Migration. The Black Migration peaked in 1915, and this is what this is depicting. female suffrage. Hopefully by now we all understand that suffrage, it's not suffrage, it's suffrage, the right to vote. There's no E between the F and the R, so there's no pain going on here. It's the right to vote. I think we've kind of established that back in chapter 14, but I don't think everybody caught on. But anywho, 19th Amendment. I took your book's definition out and I just plugged in the 19th Amendment. I don't know why they have to put their own words in. Why don't they just use the same? Because on account of sex, of course we'd use gender, but you know. But what I'm going to point out here is by any state. Remember that the states are in charge of elections. And the United States, your national government defers to states to run the elections. I mean, back in 1860, Lincoln wasn't even on the ballot in 10 southern states. States run the elections. Now, the Constitution has laws for national elections. Whoever's allowed to vote in the most numerous branch at the state level can vote at the national level. But, so this amendment is telling the states what it not, well, it's telling the states who it can't deny. Just like in 1870, 50 years later, 1920, 1870, states cannot deny based on race. Now states cannot deny based on gender. Now let's check this out. Look at, we are deceiving Russia by saying we are a democracy. Now, I mean, I'm for the women movement and all that, and I like reading about Margaret Sanger and all, but I got to call them on this last line here. Tell our government that it must liberate its people before it can claim free Russia as an ally. Russia ain't been free a day, and the people in Russia ain't been free a day in their existence. I don't know what planet they're coming from here. A free Russia? These people went from the Tsar to communism. Come on. Okay. Espionage Act, spying, obvious here. I mean, that's no big whoop. Your next one is the Sedition Act. And I left, your book's description, but I wanted to include the official definition down there. I could have just told you to look it up in a dictionary, but this is a lot more fun. It's the crime of doing something that motivates somebody else to commit treason. You're not committing treason, but you're motivating other people to commit treason. Somebody's going down to the draft board to sign up. You and I out there protesting the draft. Down with the draft, down with the draft, blah, 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 blah. And the person who was going to register for the draft sees us protesting and says, you know what, I think I'm with you. You and I didn't break the law. We have the right to petition. We have the right to peaceably assemble. First Amendment. We're not, we're peaceful about it. We're protesting. The dude decides he ain't going to sign up. He's the one who broke the law. But you and I are guilty of sedition. And during wartime, the definition of sedition gets pretty loosey-goosey. In other words, the Congress can pass laws which create new things that are considered seditious. I mean, writing editorials in the newspaper, you don't think that, well, during the Sedition Act of 1918, you could not, look at it, write anything abusive or disloyal concerning the flag, Constitution, government, or armed forces. You can't be complaining about the president. You can't be complaining about how we're waging a war, because that's liable to cause other people to, disobey their government. So it gets pretty controversial at wartime. And for those of y'all who remember Patriot Act, same thing happens when the Twin Towers come down. We start, changing a lot. More behavior was becoming under suspicion. That's all we're saying. Definition of sedition. WW1. This is actually the map I thought we were looking at before. I used to live at Springhouse Apartments on Bellawood Drive right there, Bellawood. Great turning point. The armistice line of 1918. November 11th, 11/11, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Well, 11/11 became our Veterans Day. It is your Veterans Day today. The reason Congress made that particular day Veterans Day is because it's Armistice Day. It was the, end of the Great War, which is what they called it. Trench warfare, just mind-boggling how these men lived. Memorial Day is for these people. Memorial Day is for those who died. Veterans Day is for all the veterans. Now, not just for all the veterans, but I'm just distinguishing the two. Civil War's, of course, the monster, because it's Americans killing Americans. I'm from the South. We didn't even keep up with the wounded. Check it out. But I know that at the end of the war, 70% of males eligible had served. And then there's, of course, more figures. The controversial treaty. Well, let's check something out here. Here's your League of Nations. We left that in here. Russia, of course, is going to get all this back here, but that's what Russia lost when it dropped out of the war. Cost them a pretty penny, cost them a lot of land. Blue is the area lost by Austria-Hungary. Individual countries, but they were not based on self-determination. I mean, you put the Czechs and the Slovaks together, you put groups here together, it just, it was politicians getting in there and screwing things up. And then there's the German area lost. Love the cartoon of Wilson selling the treaty. League of Nations is the mule. Of course, that was the kingpin of the treaty. And that's why we don't. There's you got your Republican Senate examining Wilson over, trying to sell it to us. Negotiating the rapids of ratification. Well, and he never was successful. He never was. And that right there is the sticking point. Independence of all members, and the council shall advise upon the means. I mean, at this point, our neutrality was such that we were committed to the idea that we are not going to go to war over some hiccup in Europe. We were not willing to make that commitment in 1919. My, how things have changed. And of course, this is just the competing visions. And they got into a constitutional debate. And if we allow the council to determine the means to handle a crisis, then you've taken it out of the United States Congress's hands. And that's the big opposition.